Celestial Summit Station shimmered above the barren moon like a jewel no one remembered to treasure. From the viewport of the incoming shuttle, Princess Elira of Valith watched its crystalline towers catch starlight and scatter it into soft violet halos. It was beautiful, coldly, impersonally beautiful, exactly like the politics that had dragged her here. She rose when the docking clamps engaged, smoothing the midnight silver folds of her ceremonial gown. Her advisor bowed stiffly as the airlock cycled open, releasing a swirl of recycled atmosphere and the faint metallic tang of 100 incompatible biologies forced into diplomacy. Elira stepped into the main concourse and immediately felt herself disappear. Delegates of towering insectoids clicked past without looking. A crystalline envoy glided by in refracted silence. Even the station's adaptive walls shifted colors in acknowledgement of others, but dimmed to neutral beige when she passed. No one saw her. Or worse, they saw her and decided there was nothing worth noticing. Her father had sent her not because she mattered, but because someone had to attend. A placeholder princess for a placeholder system. She reached the opening banquet exactly on time, another mistake. The truly important figures swept in fashionably late to collect attention like currency. Elira was directed to a distant table in the outer rings of insignificance, where she sat alone while conversations bloomed everywhere else. Her bioluminescent soup dimmed as it cooled. She was considering making an early, dignified escape when a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" She looked up and blinked. A human stood beside the chair, jacket rumpled, hair tousled, expression exhausted yet warm. His smile was the kind people offered when they desperately needed the world to be gentler for a moment. "Please," she said before she could stop herself. He dropped into the seat with a groan of relief. "Thank the stars. I've been mediating a dispute for 3 hours. I think both parties hate me equally now, which apparently means I succeeded." He extended a hand. "Finn Calder, cultural envoy, terrible at banquets, excellent at pretending I know what I'm doing." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, startlingly warm. "Elira," she said softly. "Princess of Valith." "Oh, your radiance, highness, majesty," he grimaced. "I'm sorry, humans invented 10,000 political titles and still can't use any of them correctly." "Elira is fine." His smile returned, gentler this time. "Then Elira it is." He glanced at the empty table, quite the popular corner. Despite herself, her lips curled. "It seems so." "Well," he said, flagging down a server, "their loss. I'm excellent company and starving. Could we get a fresh first course here? And maybe whatever comes after it." I blinked and missed an entire hour. Her chest warmed at how naturally he spoke to her, like she wasn't invisible, like her presence mattered. The meal passed in small moments. Finn making her laugh at shipping regulations, Elira explaining asteroid belt transport culture, Finn listening with genuine interest instead of polite obligation. Later in the morning session, while holographic diagrams tortured the delegates with trade lane toll equations, he nudged her with his stylus. "If I fall asleep, please claim humans meditate with their eyes closed." She nearly snorted aloud. When she finally whispered a suggestion, her people's flexible mining protocols, he turned toward her with instant focus. "That's brilliant," he whispered. "You should bring it up during commentary." "What? No. No one here cares what Valith does." "I care," he said simply, "and it's smart, say it." And somehow the way he said it, the way he was looking at her, made her believe she could. When the moderator unexpectedly recognized her, every head turned. Her throat tightened. Her mind emptied. Then Finn's voice reached her, low and steady. "You've got this." And she did. Her explanation was concise, practical, and impossible to dismiss. The chamber shifted around her, subtle but unmistakable. Delegates leaned forward. Questions followed. Requests for data, interest, real interest. Hours later, walking beside Finn through the station's floating the next morning began with the dull threat of bureaucratic despair. Summit Chamber 3 loomed like a monument to sleep deprivation, its tiered seats filled with delegates already losing the will to live as holographic toll charts spun slowly overhead. Elira had taken her seat early, mostly because early arrival was the only habit she could control. Finn arrived moments later carrying 2 steaming cups and the expression of a man whose soul had been replaced overnight by station-grade synth coffee. "I come bearing stimulants," he announced, handing one to her, "and the faint hope that today's discussions will involve fewer arguments about beige." "Beige?" she asked. "Apparently it's offensive in 12 cultures," he said, taking a sip. but comforting in 6, so I think the galactic compromise is confusion. She nearly laughed. She wasn't supposed to laugh here, among diplomats who outranked her by centuries, but with Finn beside her, it felt natural, like breathing. Hours passed. The Vrex ambassador droned about proportional burden distribution. A hologram displayed a three-dimensional graph that made even mathematics look bored. Finn's stylus stopped moving. The corner of his datapad showed a message in his handwriting. If I start snoring, please claim it's a human meditation technique. Her shoulders shook silently. Then, unexpected clarity. Elira leaned toward him and whispered, Valeth has run independent mining routes for 60 years. We solved this same problem with flexible lane protocols. Finn straightened, eyes widening. That's actually extremely relevant. You should say that. They won't ask me. They don't have to. His voice was soft but firm. Just request commentary. You have something valuable. Don't let them pretend you don't. Her pulse stumbled. She wasn't used to being encouraged or believed. The moderator opened the floor, sounding confident no one would bother speaking. Finn's foot nudged hers under the table, a silent push. Before she could change her mind, Elira pressed the activation stud on her console. A chime echoed through the chamber. The chair recognizes Princess Elira of Valeth. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. Her mouth went dry. But then she caught Finn's gaze, steady, encouraging, warm, and the words returned. Her explanation was clear, practical, and grounded in real experience. No grandstanding, no theatrics, just competence, and the galaxy listened. By midday, 3 delegations had approached her for detailed reports. A crystalline envoy even emitted a resonant pulse Finn later insisted was their version of a polite joke. When they escaped to the station's gardens, Elira felt different, lighter, taller somehow. See, Finn said, collapsing onto a bench and opening a ration bar with a grimace. You had something worth saying. I just reminded you you're allowed to say it. You reminded me more than that, she murmured. Yeah. He bit the ration bar, winced, and pushed it aside. Well, you reminded half the chamber that practical solutions exist, which is heroic in its own right. They drank water from his flask, earth water, faintly mineral, and watched a floating orb of moss drift lazily past. For the first time since arriving, Elira didn't feel alone. Later in her quarters, an unexpected message arrived. Multiple delegations requesting consultations, documents, cooperation, real engagement. She stared at the screen, stunned. Then another message arrived, Finn's this time. You're officially in demand. Told you competence was contagious. She smiled, unable to help it. But the day wasn't finished with her. That evening the station lights dimmed to mimic night, and she sought solace in the quiet observation lounge, the one place that felt honest. She stood alone beneath unfathomable starlight. The door whispered open behind her. I had a feeling you'd be here, Finn said, stepping inside with 2 cups of tea. You're developing predictable patterns, dangerous in politics. Convenient for friends. Friends, she repeated softly. The word felt fragile, precious. He handed her a cup. The steam smelled almost like real Valeth tea. You're awake late, she said. So are you. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about the invitations, he guessed, or the fact that you impressed half the summit before lunch. Elira turned toward the stars. I don't understand any of this. Delegates who wouldn't look at me yesterday now want my expertise. It feels unreal. Feels earned, Finn said simply. But why now? Because someone finally listened, he said. And once one person does, everyone else realizes they should have, too. Someone, she murmured, meaning you. He shrugged lightly, but his eyes were warm. I just sat down at your table, Elira. You did everything else. Silence settled, a peaceful one, threaded with something delicate and electric. What if this attention becomes dangerous? She asked quietly. Then you navigate it like you did today. And if the summons arrived just after midnight, an hour when nothing good ever happened on Celestial Summit Station. Elira's datapad pulsed with a gentle amber glow, too polite for the weight it carried. Emergency session, Chamber 1. Immediate attendance required. Her heartbeat quickened. Emergency sessions at this hour meant only one thing. Someone somewhere had brought the galaxy dangerously close to tearing itself open. She dressed quickly and stepped into the corridor, the station eerily quiet at this hour. When she entered the colossal chamber, the atmosphere was already charged with tension. Delegates whispered urgently, clusters forming like storm fronts. A massive hologram hovered above the central forum. A rotating asteroid belt, her region's border, now glowing with layered territorial overlays from 4 competing powers. The colors bled into each other like bruises. Ships were mobilizing, lines had been crossed, the situation was close to spiraling. Elira took her seat, forcing calm into her breath. 2 rows behind her, Finn caught her eye and gave a subtle nod, steady, grounding. She hadn't realized how much she needed it until that moment. The next 4 hours were a blur of accusation and counter-accusation, historical grievances, commercial interests, strategic excuses. No one offered solutions, only justifications for escalation. When the moderator declared a recess at 400 hours, Elira stood, legs trembling from tension more than exhaustion. She didn't make it 3 steps before a familiar figure materialized beside her, Ambassador Kelrin of the hegemony of 9 suns. His shifting bioluminescent patterns pulsed in urgent, calculated rhythm. "Princess Elira," a word. Of course, here it was, the cost of relevance. He guided her into a private consultation alcove. The privacy field shimmered to life around them, muting the world. Then his voice shifted, soft, persuasive, dangerously smooth. "The hegemony is prepared to offer Valeth sweeping benefits," he said. "Reduced tariffs, priority docking rights, access to our protected trade corridors." Elira held herself still. "In exchange for your public support for our territorial claim," Kelrin said. "A statement from Valeth would shape neutral opinion. Your system's proximity grants you legitimacy." There it was, the trap wrapped in velvet. A month ago, she might have accepted out of fear. A week ago, she might have hesitated. But now she saw the chains beneath the gilded offer. "That is generous," she said carefully. "But may I ask, would the hegemony consider an alternative approach?" Kelrin stilled. "Alternative." Elira drew up the map on her datapad, projecting it into midair. "A consortium," she said. "Shared administration. Shared resource rights. Equal access based on documented investment. Valeth serving as neutral coordinator." Kelrin's patterns flickered sharply. Surprise, annoyance, recalculation. "You propose we share control with the Vrex and corporate factions." He said. "I propose cooperation instead of collision," she replied. "Everyone gets something. No one loses face, and no one starts a war in my backyard." Silence filled the alcove like rising water. Then Kelrin murmured, "You are not what I expected, Princess." "I've been hearing that a lot lately." When the privacy field dissolved, the corridor was alive again with anxious motion. Finn leaned against the wall in what he clearly believed was a casual pose, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I may have prevented a war," she said, "or started a political avalanche, unclear." "Same result," he said, pushing off the wall to walk beside her. "One just takes longer to fall." They reached the observation deck where delegates were gathering in hushed clusters. When Elira entered, conversations paused, heads turned. For the first time, eyes sought her, not out of courtesy but expectation. The Minor Systems Coalition approached first. "Princess Elira," Ambassador Tevik said, "if you intend to propose intervention, we wish to support you officially." Elira glanced at Finn. He gave no signal, only that familiar, quiet encouragement that said, "Choose your path, I'll walk beside you." She turned back to the coalition. "I'm proposing a consortium," she said. "Shared oversight, neutral coordination. If you join, we can shift the balance." Interest sparked across the gathered faces. And suddenly she was at the center, answering questions, designing structures, shaping the conversation. 17 species, 8 systems. A swirl of voices aligned around her calm, steady certainty. By the time the next session opened, the room felt different, like gravity had shifted. Like the galaxy had quietly adjusted its orbit around her. Elira stood and presented the consortium plan. No tremor in her voice this time, no doubt, just clarity, data, precedent, logic, a viable future. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then Kelrin rose, the moment stretched like a blade. "The hegemony," he announced, "finds this proposal compelling. We are willing to negotiate its implementation." Shock rippled, then momentum. The Vrex followed, then the corporate bloc, then the regional defense pact. By the time the vote came, the crisis had bent, not exploded. The session ended, delegates dispersed. Elira stood in the corridor, dazed by the shift inside her. Finn appeared with 2 cups of coffee, grinning like a man who just bet on an underdog and watched her conquer the arena. The station never truly slept, but there were hours when it pretended to dream. By the time Elira slipped back into the observation lounge, the artificial night cycle had dimmed the lights to a soft indigo glow. The window wrapped around her like a quiet cathedral of starlight. She needed air, or space, or silence, anything that wasn't applause or attention or the sudden weight of being taken seriously by people who had ignored her all her life. She wasn't alone for long. The door whispered open and footsteps approached with a familiarity she had already come to recognize. "I brought contraband," Finn announced softly. She turned. He held 2 steaming cups. "Station coffee." She guessed. "Worse," he said, handing her one. "Diplomatic emergency blend, tastes like determination and regret." She took a sip, grimaced. "Regret is accurate." He dropped into the adaptive chair beside hers, sighing like a man whose bones had aged 30 years in one day. "You didn't look for me," she said quietly. Finn blinked. "Should I have?" "I thought," she hesitated. "I thought you might be waiting outside the chamber." He tilted his head, studying her expression with that gentle, attentive focus she was slowly getting used to. "Elira," he said, "I didn't wait outside because I knew you didn't need me there." Her breath caught. "I wanted to be," Finn added softly. "But you walked into that chamber like someone who had already decided who she was." Elira turned her gaze back to the stars. She swallowed against the strange tightness in her chest. "You're giving me too much credit." "No," Finn said. "I'm giving you exactly the amount you've earned." Silence settled between them, comfortable, warm, threaded with something that felt dangerously close to longing. "Tomorrow will be difficult," Elira whispered. Finn tipped his head back, eyes closing briefly. "Kelrin isn't done testing you." "He wants something," she murmured. "He sees leverage." "He sees a threat," Finn corrected. "You've proven that a small system can influence galactic policy. Major powers hate that." The truth sent a ripple of cold through her. "So what do I do?" she asked. "You keep doing exactly what you're doing." Finn opened his eyes, turning to her. "You speak clearly, you don't retreat, and you don't let people like Kelrin decide who you are." Her heartbeat fluttered unsteadily. "Finn," she said softly, "why do you help me like this?" He froze, not visibly, but in the subtle way his breath stilled. "Because," he said slowly, "I know what it feels like to walk into a room and assume no one will listen." Elira's throat tightened. "And because," he continued, voice gentling, "when someone finally does listen, it changes you. I saw that in you, and I wanted," he hesitated. "I wanted to be there for it." She didn't know what to say. Words felt fragile and inadequate. They sat in silence, the stars drifting in slow orbits beyond the glass. The station hummed softly as though trying not to interrupt them. Eventually, Finn leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know what the others see when they look at you now?" he asked. "A political inconvenience." "A storm," Finn said. "A beautiful, terrifying, unstoppable storm." Heat flickered under her skin, not embarrassment, but something deeper. "You exaggerate," she whispered. "Not enough," he said. Something passed between them then, something unspoken but unmistakable. Elira felt it pulse through the quiet space like a heartbeat. She turned toward him. He mirrored the movement unconsciously. Their shoulders nearly brushed. For one suspended moment, it felt like the universe had narrowed to the width of that small distance. "I should rest," she whispered. "You should," he agreed. Neither moved. Eventually, Finn stood reluctantly. "If you need anything, advice, strategy, terrible coffee, just call." She smiled softly. "What if I simply need company?" Finn stilled. "Then," he said, voice low, warm, "you won't even have to ask." Elira slept for barely 3 hours, but it was enough for her mind to settle into the cold clarity of purpose. When she stepped into Summit Chamber 1 the next morning, she expected tension. She did not expect silence. The room was unusually still. Delegates who normally chatted in low clusters were watching the central forum with sharpened interest. Something had shifted again. Finn was already seated in the Earth delegation row. When he saw her enter, his eyebrows lifted in a subtle warning. "Be careful." She nodded once and took her seat just as the moderator called the chamber to order. "Delegates," the moderator began, "the hegemony of 9 suns has requested special consideration regarding administrative authority in the disputed belt. Ambassador Kelrin will present." Elira's spine stiffened. Kelrin stepped forward, bioluminescent lines rippling in diplomatic formality. His voice carried easily across the chamber. "While Princess Elira's consortium proposal has merit," he began, "the hegemony believes the administrative role should fall to a system of established influence. Neutrality is commendable but insufficient." Elira's breath froze. This wasn't a challenge. It was an attempt to remove her. Kelrin continued smoothly. "We therefore propose a revised structure, one in which Valith participates but does not coordinate. This will ensure stability under proven leadership. Elira felt heat flood her face. She had expected resistance, negotiation, but not this. Not an attempt to quietly erase her assent. A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Finn was watching her, eyes steady, silently urging. "Stand up, don't let him define you." The moderator opened the floor. Elira pressed the activation stud. The chair recognizes Princess Elira of Valith. Kelrin's light patterns flickered, just for a moment, surprise. Elira stood, heartbeat steady now. She met the chamber with calm, measured certainty. "With respect to Ambassador Kelrin," she said, "his proposal misrepresents the purpose of the consortium." A hush fell. "Coordination is not dominance," she continued. "Valith does not claim authority. We offer structure. We offer neutrality. Removing that neutral anchor risks pulling the system back into conflict." She projected her datapad, showing the distributed network map she'd prepared the night before. "This framework only works if the coordinator has nothing to gain from favoring any party. Valith is uniquely positioned because we lack the power to manipulate outcomes. That is not a weakness. It is the reason the proposal functions at all." Delegates leaned forward. Kelrin's lights pulsed sharply, agitation disguised as diplomacy. He responded, "Neutrality is admirable, but influence." "Influence," Elira cut in gently, "is precisely what created this crisis." A low ripple spread through the chamber. Finn's lips curved into the smallest victorious smile. Elira continued, voice steady. "The consortium is not about choosing who leads. It is about choosing not to let power decide everything. If the chamber prefers an authority that benefits one party over others, then call it what it is. Not cooperation, but occupation by committee." Kelrin bristled. The moderator raised a hand. "Ambassador Kelrin, do you wish to respond?" Kelrin hesitated, an unthinkable display for a representative of the hegemony. And in that hesitation, the entire room saw it. Elira had outmaneuvered him. Again. The coalition delegates stood, one by one, in symbolic alignment. "Valith as coordinator," Ambassador Tevik said firmly, "is essential. We support the original structure." Another delegation voiced agreement, then another. Finn rose, speaking for Earth. "Earth endorses Princess Elira's framework," he said, fully. Elira's breath caught, not because she doubted Earth's support, but because Finn's voice carried something deeper than policy. Conviction, faith, loyalty. It hit her with unexpected force. Kelrin's patterns dimmed. He offered one curt diplomatic bow and sat down, beaten yet unable to retaliate without appearing petty. The moderator called for procedural review and dismissed the chamber for recess. Elira felt the adrenaline drain from her so quickly she had to steady herself on the seat. Chairs scraped, voices rose, but she heard none of it, not until Finn's hand gently touched her elbow. "Walk with me," he murmured. She followed him out into a quiet corridor overlooking the gardens. Only when they were alone did he turn to face her. "Elira," he said softly, "that was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen." She exhaled shakily. "I thought he would crush me." "He tried," Finn replied. "And you didn't just stand your ground, you pulled the ground out from under him." His smile was soft, proud, impossibly warm. Elira looked away, pulse fluttering. "I didn't want them to see me falter." "But I saw you," Finn said gently, "and you didn't." Something in her chest tightened at those words. Not painful, just unfamiliar. She met his eyes, and the world seemed to narrow again, shrinking to the space between them. "Finn," she whispered, "I don't know what's happening to me." He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she felt the warmth of him. "You're becoming who you were always meant to be," he murmured, "and it's extraordinary to watch." Elira's breath trembled. For a heartbeat, she thought he might reach for her. For a heartbeat, she thought she might let him. But the moment broke when a chime echoed through the corridor, summoning them back for the final deliberations. Finn exhaled. "Duty calls." Elira nodded, forcing steadiness. "We should go." They walked toward the chamber side by side, closer than they'd walked before, shoulders nearly touching. The final session of the summit felt strangely quiet, not empty, but expectant. Delegates filled the seats with an alert stillness, as if aware they were standing at the edge of something historic or fragile or both. Elira walked to her place with steady steps. She could feel eyes following her now, not dismissive, not patronizing, but searching, measuring, respecting. Finn met her gaze across the chamber, not with pride, though she knew he felt it. Not with relief, but with something deeper. Something like, "You're not alone." The session began. The moderator reviewed the amendments, the coalition statements, the endorsements. Holographic projections shimmered overhead. Valith's proposed consortium structure, now refined through multiple rounds of negotiation. When the vote finally opened, the chamber fell into a hush so complete she could hear her pulse. One by one, the lights aligned. Endorsement, endorsement, endorsement. Even Kelrin's grudging acceptance illuminated the console with reluctant approval, and then it was done. The consortium passed, the crisis dissolved. Elira's breath left her in a slow, trembling release. Delegates rose from their seats. Conversation surged through the room like the first warm breeze after winter. Finn didn't wait for ceremony. As the chamber erupted into motion, he bypassed clusters of congratulators to reach her side. "Elira," he said quietly. She turned toward him, and before she could speak, his hand found hers, not in a grand gesture. Just a warm, steady clasp that grounded her more deeply than any applause. "You did it," Finn murmured. "We did it," she corrected softly. He huffed a quiet laugh. "I took notes. You prevented a multi-faction conflict. You made me believe I could." His thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles, absent-minded almost, except it was. Not with the way his breath caught, not with the way her pulse lifted. Delegates approached in waves. Congratulations, gratitude, proposals for future cooperation. Elira responded as best she could, but Finn never released her hand, anchoring her without words as the world shifted around them. When the tide of voices finally receded, he leaned close. "Observation lounge." She nodded, "Please." They slipped away before anyone could pull her into another diplomatic spiral. The lounge greeted them with its familiar hush. Starfield spilled across the glass like ink written by gods. Elira had stood here dozens of times, but tonight it felt different, like she was seeing it with new eyes, or perhaps simply as a new person. Finn exhaled, resting both hands on the railing. "You changed things today." "So did you," she murmured. "Not like you." She stepped beside him, "Exactly like me." He swallowed, jaw tightening, as if he was fighting the instinct to deny himself something. "Finn," she said gently, "look at me." He did, and for once he didn't mask anything. Not admiration, not fear, not whatever emotion lived raw and bright behind his eyes. "I didn't plan for this," he said quietly. "Neither did I. I was supposed to be an observer, a translator, someone who explains other people's cultures, not someone who—" He trailed off, searching. Elira stepped a fraction closer. "Not someone who what?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Who becomes part of someone else's story?" Her breath trembled. The distance between them felt charged, fragile, inevitable. "Finn," she murmured, "you didn't become part of my story. You helped me write it." He laughed softly, an unsteady, disbelieving sound, and pressed a hand briefly to his chest as if steadying something. "I don't know where this goes," he admitted. "Human, Valith, diplomat, princess. Everything about this should be complicated." "Everything is complicated," she said, "but some things." She reached up, barely touching his cheek with her fingertips. "Some things are simple." Finn closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough for her to feel the subtle shiver in his breath. When he looked at her again, nothing was hidden. "Elira," he asked softly, "is this something you want?" She held his gaze, not as a princess, not as a coordinator of a multi-system alliance, but as herself. "Yes," she whispered. He didn't rush, didn't assume. He simply stepped closer, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't when he finally drew her into an embrace, gentle, deliberate, grounding. Elira felt something inside her settle into place. Not like falling, like arriving. After a long moment, she spoke against his shoulder. "What happens now?" Finn smiled into her hair. "Now, you go home as the woman who changed the summit, and I somehow convince my superiors that Earth should send me on every mission involving Valith for the rest of my career." She laughed quietly. "And after that?" she asked. "That," Finn said, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "That we figure out together." Outside, a transport vessel drifted past the station, its lights carving gold through the darkness. Elira watched it, feeling the strange, wonderful certainty blooming in her chest. She had come here invisible. She was leaving seen, not because of a title or a vote or a sudden rise in status, but because someone had looked at her and recognized the woman she could become. And she, in turn, had recognized the man who saw her. When her ship's departure was announced over the station-wide system, she didn't feel uncertain. She felt ready. Elira stood with Finn at the viewport one last time, hands intertwined. "To new beginnings," he murmured. "To the ones we choose," she whispered. Their fingers tightened. And for the first time, Elira stepped into her future not alone, but with someone who made her believe she had always...
Wir haben so nie gestritten, wir kennen uns schon seit zig Jahren, aber nie
Ist aber auch nicht gesund, oder?
Weiß ich nicht. Also bis jetzt schon.
Ich muss das mal sagen.
Aber er will wirklich nicht?
Ich sag dann, du wirst drüben verlangt. Nee, ich sag, ich schlaf. Okay.
Achso, will sie gerade nur nicht bewegen oder was? Das sind ihm doch ähnlich, ne?
Pfandflaschen in den USA gibt's nicht. Auch schön.
Es gibt keine Pfand.
Carmen, Servus!
Vor allem kannst du hier noch den Deckel richtig abmachen.
Die Carmen ist am Start.
Ja, ich wollte gehen, aber
Carmen!
mein Platz drüben ist besetzt.
Drama Baby. Ja, das ist ja eher Jascha und Sebastian, ne?
Was denn?
Drama Baby.
Nicht, ja?
Also aber auch nur, wenn Sebastian krummelig wird. Ansonsten habe ich da nie Probleme.
gib her.
Immer nur, wenn er dann irgendwie so anfängt, dieses Negative zu
Ja,
sehen.
dein Pokéball leuchtet hier vor sich hin.
Was ist das denn?
Ja, hier, Dings hat es erfahren. Das ist ein Pokémon Go Plus Plus.
Hä? Was macht das?
Was kann das?
NYPD! Weißt du, warum machen wir
Talk.
denn? Ich habe eine richtig geile Idee.
Ich bin,
Aber
also ich weiß
ich hab
jetzt schon,
die-
dass sie mir nicht gefallen
Ich habe
wird.
die übelste Idee, aber ich sag's euch nicht. Nein, warum
fang
machen wir
jetzt
denn
gleich
nicht die
einen wilden
Sprite Challenge?
Sebastian.
Lass halt Sprite Challenge machen.
Oh, fuck,
Nee,
Alter.
ich habe gerade gesoffen. Nee, ich bin raus.
Also ich...
Vorne macht Mimimi.
Ich dachte so, ich komme jetzt hier mit dem übelsten, mit der übelsten Banger-Idee und
lass
ich
machen.
höre nur so.
Alter, ich hab damit kein
Und
Problem.
ich habe gedacht, du kommst jetzt irgendwie mit einer Gangbang-Party oder so. Halt. Irgendwas, was Spaß macht.
Ich bin dabei. Tom ist
Party.
dabei und Alex
Hier da
auch.
hinten.
Nee, wenn dann alle.
Oh, jetzt eigentlich
In der Bumshalle da.
Wirklich. Ich dachte jetzt wirklich, jetzt kommt er mit dem übelsten Vorschlag. Keine Ahnung, so, hey
was müssen wir
Leute,
heute noch machen?
ich bin bereit für ein
Wir
Gangbang.
können noch ballern gehen.
Wir können Shooting Range gehen.
Shooting Range wäre auch fett, ja.
Ja, für
Damit
Sonntag
kommen sie
können wir
jetzt
sowas machen.
2 Stunden zu spät.
Das war Shooting Range machen.
Wann hatten wir das erste Mal gesagt, wir könnten auch
Aber
nach
immer
Kansas
wenn-
fahren?
Immer
Ja,
wenn
als wir
Sebastian
auf dem Weg
ballern
zum
gehen
Dings
will,
waren, ne?
Man kennt jetzt
Oh.
nicht schlechter gerechnet.
3 Stunden.
Na gut, ich